Have you ever been scared to revisit a game from your childhood? Booting up the main menu, listening to the music, and pressing the start button will send you back to your adolescence. However, all of this may fall apart after pressing that start button. Replaying some of your favorite games as a kid can always be a mixed bag. Sure, you probably stumbled upon some great games here and there that you reminisce over fondly, but you're bound to have a few stinkers in there. The issue growing up with the GameCube and PS2, mostly the PS2 if I'm being honest, is that we were spoiled. Developers brought their visions to life with new hardware. Classics were released left and right, studios were allowed to experiment, controlling the third dimension was becoming more and more common, and a lot of modern gaming DNA was established. What I'm trying to get at here is there are a lot of special games from this time, whether it's some licensed game from your favorite anime at the time, or a game that shaped the genre for years to come, it was all there, for better or for worse. And one of those games that stood the test of time is Kingdom Hearts. Kingdom Hearts 1 holds a very special place in my heart. It's one of the earliest games I remember playing as a kid. I vividly remember beating this game several times, getting attached to characters, lost in deep jungle, leaving the game running to hear the music, and introducing me to some of my best friends I still speak with to this day. To say Kingdom Hearts left a mark on me would be an understatement. My high school varsity jacket has Destiny's Never Left a Chance on it, and my English teacher thought I'd be a famous author one day. This game, and series for that matter, was probably the single most formative piece of media from my childhood, and regardless of where the series went, I wholeheartedly believe Kingdom Hearts 1 was a magical experience with a timeless story and impressive gameplay 23 years later. All great stories start with a dream, so let's talk about Square, Disney, and Tetsuya Nomura. Kingdom Hearts' origin is actually pretty wild. Shinji Hashimoto and Hironobu Sakaguchi were brainstorming ideas for a new game. Now, who are these people? Well, they're two legends. As a heads up, I'll be using Square, Squaresoft, and Square Enix interchangeably throughout this video. Hashimoto joined Squaresoft in 1995 and was responsible for producing a plethora of games. The World Ends With You, Kingdom Hearts, and Final Fantasy VIII Forward were all games he produced. Whenever I do research for these videos, Moby Games is a great resource documenting video game development teams. Now, I've been to this website countless times, but I don't recall seeing someone with 319 credits across 206 games. I'll say that again. 319 credits across 206 games. That's absurd. Accompanying Hashimoto in this discussion was the legendary Hironobu Sakaguchi. Introducing Sakaguchi is like introducing Michael Jackson to music fans. Everyone should know who this is. In case you don't for some reason, Sakaguchi is one of the several co-creators of a little franchise you may have heard of called Final Fantasy. He directed Final Fantasy 1 through 5, all of which garnered critical and commercial success. Hopefully everyone understands how important Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest are for JRPGs. This generational run cemented his legacy, and his influence can still be felt today. Getting back to our story, Hashimoto and Sakaguchi wanted to create a game that could compete with Mario 64 that leveraged 3D space. After talking about it, they both agreed this idea was too far-fetched since they couldn't compete with Mario. Unless they had something outlandish like Disney characters, they believed the game would have been dead on arrival. This is slightly off topic, but can you imagine if Kingdom Hearts turned out to be a platformer developed by Squaresoft? Like, this is the equivalent of Infinity Ward wanting to make a fighting game. Before this conversation ended, I guess Tetsuya Nomura was in the corner eavesdropping because he offered to direct this mysterious new project. Nomura was hired as a debugger for Final Fantasy IV in 1990. He was then staffed as a monster designer on Final Fantasy V and earned more and more senior roles until cementing his legendary status for his contributions with Final Fantasy VII. As Nomura rose up the ranks, Square obviously understood his talents and believed he'd find success in whatever he pursued. And as talented as Nomura was, the biggest driver behind Kingdom Hearts was logistics. In the late 90s and early 2000s, Square and Disney's Japanese headquarters were actually in the same building. During an elevator ride, Hashimoto pitched this concept to a Disney executive who was immediately on board. Disney sent Hashimoto and Nomura numerous scenarios before Nomura concluded he wanted to create an entirely original concept with Disney characters. Since this was Nomura's first time serving as a director, he pitched the story to Sakaguchi for feedback. Sakaguchi criticized the story for being too simple, which is so ironic in 2025. He firmly believed games developed by Squaresoft should be grand in scale and have the same scope as a Final Fantasy game. With the story revised, the team established, and pre-production complete, Kingdom Hearts officially entered development in February of 2000. Now, Square Enix is known for many things like creating intricate stories, engrossing worlds, remarkable art direction, and outstanding graphics and visual presentation. In my opinion, however, what separates Square Enix from the rest of the industry is their outstanding music, and I think Nomura understood this as well. While the original Kingdom Hearts development team had no shortage of talent, one person in particular etched her name into the hearts of millions. She's one of the most important figures for Kingdom Hearts, and Square Enix for that matter, and has been working on the series now for over 20 years. This person is, of course, the legendary Yoko Shimomura. I'll talk about her much more in depth later, but calling her important is an understatement, especially when talking about Square Enix's identity. She is every bit as important to the industry as the legendary Nobuo Uematsu. After speaking with Nomura, she understood the tone of the game and got to work on a pretty good soundtrack. For the game's opening, Shimomura deliberately picked Utada Hikaru to perform simple and clean. Hikaru, a Japanese pop star sensation at the time, was nervous because this was her first time producing video game music. I'm not sure whether the single was released before or after the game, but this single sold almost 1 million copies in Japan, and for good reason. Simple and Clean has been a classic for over 23 years, remixed countless times throughout the series, and got me acting up as a grown man. The last area Nomura seemed to struggle with was the game's name. He initially wanted to call it Kingdom after a Disney theme park ride, but Square Enix couldn't secure the IP for Kingdom. He then reflected on the themes of the story and wanted to call it Hearts, which ran into the same problem. Who would have thought? He finally combined these two names together to form Kingdom Hearts, and 25 months later, Kingdom Hearts released in Japan on March 28, 2002, September 17, 2002 in North America, and November 15, 2002 in Europe. And as we all know, all these releases were not created equal. As some parts of the West waited over 7 months for this game to be localized, Square wanted to add additional content. The West's release featured new keyblades, new bosses, bug fixes, updated AI, and more content, making it the superior version of Kingdom Hearts. For about a month. On December 26, 2002, Square Enix released Kingdom Hearts Final Mix in Japan exclusively. The Final Mix edition was developed to be the definitive version of this game, featuring new story cutscenes, even more keyblades, bosses, combat adjustments, new abilities, changing certain enemy colors, and much more. Fortunately for fans in the West, we only had to wait a decade for an official release, and I hope you can hear the sarcasm in my voice. Kingdom Hearts was showered with critical and commercial praise. GameSpot called Kingdom Hearts the best crossover since Capcom vs. SNK, and it was one of the best-selling games of 2002. If you don't know much about Kingdom Hearts and you're watching this, which, hey, I'm happy you're here, you'll probably attribute a lot of this success to the Disney characters, and you wouldn't be wrong. Disney's movies and characters have captured hearts of millions since 1937. Kids, teens, adults, and seniors have their favorite movies from their childhoods. Seeing these characters appear in a video game developed by Squaresoft, who was still in their prime, with the Disney Interactive logo, catapulted Kingdom Hearts into the limelight. And while this is certainly true, I don't think Square gets enough credit for how fundamentally sound Kingdom Hearts is as a video game. When you're playing a Square Enix game, you know you're playing a Square Enix game. As stated earlier, I believe the Square Enix charm is built through their intricate stories, engrossing worlds, interesting characters, remarkable art direction, the industry's best music, and outstanding graphics and visual presentation. The Square's visuals have always been ahead of their time. Their sprites from their older games are adorable, expressive, and full of life, and Nomura brilliantly translated this art direction into Kingdom Hearts. Sora, Riku, Kairi, and Ansem, to name a few, are great character designs. As the poster boy of the series, Sora has an iconic design. His design is the happy marriage of Disney's exaggerated art direction from the 80s and 90s and Square Enix's stylized anime aesthetic, and nothing articulates this better than those size 25 shoes and the Keyblade. I won't harp on feet since we're not that kind of channel, but Sora, Kairi, and Riku's enormous feet are, for better or for worse, some of their most iconic traits. Their comically disproportionate feet-to-body ratio alone lets the audience know what kind of game this is if the Keyblade doesn't. I wouldn't be surprised if the Keyblade was considered to be one of the most iconic video game weapons. The brilliance of this weapon comes from its original design, how jarring it looks when you first see it, and the fact that it's a weapon. When you first see this thing, I wouldn't be surprised if you laughed at it. I mean, it's literally a giant key. The absurdity of turning a giant key into a weapon used in combat rides the fine line between crazy and genius. Replacing a sword with a key preserves Disney's whimsical charm if Sora's spiky hair and big blue smile doesn't. Another recurring trend we find across these characters is Nomura's morbid obsession with buckles and zippers. Sora, Kairi, and Ansem passed the eye test, but why does Riku have ankle buckles and Velcro shoes? He still looks fine, but like everyone in the cast, he'd go through some drastic redesigns, and while the main characters were redesigned in practically every game, Nomura's monster designs would prove to be timeless. It shouldn't be strange that I'm spending so much time on character and monster design since Nomura spent a lot of his career designing monsters. As a series, Kingdom Hearts is home to some of the most unique enemies in gaming. Honestly, I could dedicate an entire video to the Heart list, but we're already on page 4 of this script and we aren't even halfway through my outline, so we gotta pick up the pace. In short, all the Heart lists are iconic. Whether it's bosses, recurring Heart lists, or just their designs, they all look incredible. One of the craziest details is how Nomura went out of his way to create unique Heart lists for every world. The Gargoyles in Hollow Bastion, Neo Shadows at the End of the World, Power Wilds in Deep Jungle, Darkside being, well, Darkside, and more are just astonishing. I genuinely don't think Nomura gets enough credit for the volume of great monsters he's created over the years. Nevertheless, designs are only one piece of the puzzle. Like I said earlier, Square has always been ahead of the competition with visuals and music. So how are the visuals? They're gorgeous. They are absolutely gorgeous. Before starting the game, you're greeted with Kingdom Hearts' iconic opening. While this footage is captured from the remix collections, these visuals and CGI have held up very well, especially compared to others at the time. We'll get to the music in a second, but this opening is an excellent intro for Sora, Riku, and Kairi. Seeing Sora try to save Riku, drowning underwater, unable to reach him, only to wake up to Kairi as he falls into his heart, establishes mystery in one of the overarching themes without saying a single word. This opening introduces characters, solidifies the tone of the narrative, establishes the themes, and prepares you for the incredible music you'll be hearing. Between the characters, visuals, and graphics, we can really start to feel that Square Enix magic. The other integral piece of creating this magic is Yoko Shimomura's otherworldly score. So let's get an immediate bias I have out of the way. Yoko Shimomura is my favorite video game composer ever. It's not a stretch to say she's the main reason I got into orchestral, jazz, pop, and other musical genres when I was a kid. I know I wasn't the only person who sat at the title screen listening to Dearly Beloved only to be interrupted by Simple and Clean after. And the funny thing about that is it wasn't just nostalgia. Dearly Beloved, Simple and Clean, Dive into the Heart, Night of Fate, Hollow Bastion, Kairi, Riku, the Kingdom Hearts version of One Winged Angel, Fragments of Sorrow, Disappeared, and practically all the original tracks have been on repeat for 20 years and counting. Shimomura's music is mysterious, quaint, atmospheric, heartwarming, and genuinely moving at times. While everyone loves Simple and Clean and Dearly Beloved, everyone also has favorites. And these aren't the, oh, this is really your favorite type of favorite, because every song is incredible. The Kingdom Hearts soundtrack is one of those rare soundtracks you can just press shuffle on and won't be disappointed with whatever plays. I know growing up with this music was special, but I wouldn't be surprised if some of its magic rubbed off on adults. Music in video games wouldn't be the same without Yoko Shimomura. She's been making music now for over 30 years. You've probably heard her music or contributions in one of these games, and I'm sure it stuck with you. After Kingdom Hearts released in 2002, Yoko Shimomura left Square due to maternity leave. I'd imagine fans of her work who heard this announcement were probably worried. A modern parallel for this was when Shoji Meguro announced he was leaving Atlus. Like Shimomura, they'd both become freelance artists working closely with their previous employers. I thought I'd bring this up because before doing research for this video, I thought she worked at Square Enix and was a musical consultant on other projects. This seems like the best of both worlds for someone of her caliber though. While freelance could be daunting, Yoko Shimomura has been a legend since arguably the 90s. To this day, she works closely with Square Enix and Nintendo, and her genius is still highly sought after. Several decades later, Square Enix still understands that her captivating score is a foundational piece for all of their games. The final pillar bolstering Square's magical experience is their gameplay, which I should probably provide some basic context for. Kingdom Hearts 1 follows the story of 3 friends dreaming of escaping their home, Destiny Islands, to go on an adventure. Sora, the main character, cares about his friends and wants to explore. Kairi exists, and Riku, Sora's best friend, desperately wants to see the rest of the world and cares for his friends. The 3 of them decide building a raft is the best way to do this. Later, a storm approaches, threatening to destroy their raft. Sora departs for the island, encounters black creatures, Riku embraces the darkness, Sora summons a mysterious weapon, watches Kairi disappear, you have a fight with Darkseid, and eventually get swallowed up in darkness. After waking up in Traverse Town, you fight some Heartless, barely miss Donald and Goofy, and are defeated by Final Fantasy VIII's Leon. Sora then wakes up in a hotel with Yuffie and Squall, telling him the Heartless are attracted to the Keyblade, the weapon Sora's been wielding. Squall tells him he's the Keyblade's chosen one and that that it's his job to destroy the Heartless by sealing each world's keyhole, which will prevent them from spreading, while Mickey tells Donald and Goofy to find and support the Keyblade Master. From here, Sora, Donald, and Goofy's adventures of making new friends and sealing keyholes begins as you search for your friends. Before landing in a new world, however, you have to complete these gummy-shaped levels, and these are fine. I honestly don't have much to say about them. Players can create their own ships if you figure out the system or select one of the presets you're given throughout the game. All in all, this is a pretty basic shoot 'em up. You really don't spend a ton of time doing these levels, and even less after unlocking Warp Drive. Most of your time will be spent exploring worlds and fighting Heartless. Now, Kingdom Hearts 1's worlds are borderline genius. Nomura's design ethos, Shimomura recreating iconic Disney tracks, and all of them feeling unique is quite the achievement. Before creating these worlds, you can tell Nomura wanted to provide them with a distinct feeling. I understand Nomura was an experienced monster designer and probably has tons of designs floating in his mind, but materializing these concepts in a game with Kingdom Hearts' scope in your directorial debut is mind-boggling levels of confidence. This resulted in Nomura creating a unique Heartless for each world. Deep Jungle had monkey-adjacent Heartless, Neverland's Heartless wore pirate themes, Halloween Town had possessed ghosts and gargoyles, and so on. Additionally, all the enemies function differently with unique attacks, forcing players to approach them differently. Whether they're shadows phasing into the floor, large bodies who can only be hit in the back, or gargoyles you have to chase down or use magic with, there's a ton of variety here. Nevertheless, creating a group of Heartless wasn't enough to satisfy Nomura. While many would settle with the novelty of Disney characters, worlds, and the outstanding musical score, Nomura remembered this was a video game, and video games are defined by their mechanics. Instead of creating a template for each world to abide by, he challenged his team to diversify each world by introducing unique gimmicks, puzzles, exploration, and reasons for players to revisit them. In order to progress through Wonderland, you have to interact with the environment. Dropping potions, lighting fires, and other actions are how you gather evidence to progress. Deep Jungle finds you swinging on vines like Tarzan in the movie, and Agrabah forces you to unlock doors via keyholes littered throughout the world, to name a few. Introducing these soft, almost puzzle-like objectives in your path provides each world with a distinct flow and makes them a ton of fun to explore. As you play the game, you'll unlock new movement options like high jump and glide, allowing you to access areas you couldn't before. When you're exploring, you'll inevitably come across these Trinity signs, but you can't access them initially. As you progress the story and Sora, Donald, and Goofy become closer, you'll unlock the ability to access these. When viewing high jump, glide, Trinities, traversal gimmicks, and other mechanics in unison, Kingdom Hearts worlds have a ton of Metroidvania DNA in them, and while none of these individually are impressive, achieving this in a 3D space in 2002 with a solid real-time combat system must have felt like an anomaly. Following Final Fantasy 1-3's success, Square decided to shake up their formula for Final Fantasy IV by introducing the active turn-based combat system. Praised at the time for being a groundbreaking gameplay evolution, Square implemented this system into all their projects. Square developed a reputation for having the best turn-based combat at the time, so when Nomura wanted to leverage the PS2's hardware to create an action RPG, I'm sure everyone probably looked at him funny. Remember, Kingdom Hearts was originally envisioned to be a Mario 64 competitor. The reason why Kingdom Hearts' combat is so special is because it's one of Square's earliest attempts at creating a completely 3D action combat system. Similar to Nomura having Sakaguchi review his initial scenario, creatives lean on and consult each other for feedback or whenever they encounter a problem. Nomura, however, was completely on his own here. In many ways, he actually carved the path forward for Square Enix to create action RPGs. It's also worth remembering that at the time, Devil May Cry 1's existence answered the question of whether creating 3D action games was even possible. And while DMC1 is celebrated for creating the character action genre, this game employed a dynamic camera. As mentioned in my Silent Hill 2 video, the reason why late 90s and early 2000s games had radically different controls was because developers had no idea how to manipulate the camera and effectively traverse 3D space. The reason I'm introducing this context is to remind everyone of the state of the industry in the late 90s and early 2000s. It's imperative to have this context so you can understand the uphill battle Nomura faced. And despite all these technical hurdles, uncertainty around 3D space, and this being Nomura's directorial debut, he shattered all expectations. Mostly. After the intro plays, Sora is greeted with a sword, staff, and shield to choose. Once the player selects their weapon, they're asked which weapon they like to give up. These basic decisions will drastically change what sort of build you'll play. Initial magic, sequence of abilities unlocked, and more are chosen here. After making your decisions and an hour of collecting junk gone, which we'll definitely talk about later, players will finally start engaging with the core combat system. Kingdom Hearts' combat is actually pretty straightforward. The bottom left-hand corner has your commands, which are self-explanatory. Select on a command, choose, and you're done. For enemies, you can lock onto them with R1, attack them with X, and string together combos by pressing it repeatedly. Dodge, roll, and or block are tied to the square button, jump with circle, and you can use skills or call your friends' attentions with triangle. Sora, Donald, and Goofy also come with equipment and item slots, allowing you to exchange gear when you aren't in combat. Additionally, every character has unique abilities they can activate. Some of these abilities can add additional swings to your combos, new combo finishers, faster attack speeds, improved mobility, and more. Furthermore, the sequence of skills unlocked are tied to which weapons you selected earlier. If you selected the sword, you'll unlock Slapshot and other offensive abilities sooner than someone who picked the staff or shield. To prevent players from equipping abilities and forgetting about them, each ability costs a specific number of ability points. This, at least initially, forces players to choose what sort of build they want if equipment and keyblades don't already govern this. As players complete worlds, side content, or just play the game, Sora will unlock different keyblades to use in combat. And while this was a great idea, older keyblades, like armor in most RPGs, quickly become obsolete. Whether the damage is too low, the keyblade is too small, or the magic gain is too marginal, you'll inevitably lean towards Oathkeeper, Oblivion, or the ultimate weapon if you want to synthesize your life away. On the topic of synthesis, Square Enix's Moogles return to synthesize items for us. Whenever you defeat an enemy, you may realize that they occasionally drop materials which can be given to Moogles to create things. Want to equip more abilities? Craft AP boosts. Struggling with a boss dealing elemental damage? Synthesize better equipment. Tired of Donald and Goofy constantly dying? Create better weapons and equipment for them. Since we're talking about Donald and Goofy, a common complaint I used to hear was how useless they were, and I definitely felt the same way when I was younger. They definitely have problems, but it seems like a lot of people set them up for failure. If you barely change your equipment, accessories, and abilities, they're absolutely useless like anyone would be if you don't engage with the mechanics. In the menu, players are presented with an assortment of tactics for Donald and Goofy, allowing us to manipulate their behaviors, and as mentioned previously, you can call their attention by pressing the triangle button. If you change their gear, update their tactics, and refine their abilities throughout the game, they're much more tolerable, but they're also not perfect. They can be a mixed bag, a lot like the bosses. Kingdom Hearts' bosses feel like the most experimental part of this game, and while that may sound like a criticism, it's much more of a peaks and valleys type of situation with the splash of frustration. The peaks and valley metaphor is derived from which boss we're talking about. If you're fighting possessed Riku in Hollow Bastion, you're in for a great time, and if you're fighting Ursula at the suggested level, I hope you're ready for a puzzle boss, and this is the problem. Every Captain Hook has an Agrabah possessed head. In my opinion, good action game bosses are built on a few criteria. All attacks must have scripted startup frames. All attacks must have at least one weakness. Moves with no startup frames shouldn't be touch of deaths or used consecutively. Attacks with small changes in animations should have an audio cue. And lastly, breaking any or all of these rules should be reserved for optional super bosses. When you combine these criteria with Kingdom Hearts' mechanics, you get a game that's a ton of fun to play under the right circumstances. Riku is a great boss fight because his attacks are fair. Players are forced to dodge, block, jump, and glide to avoid his attacks. He requires mastery over the system mechanics if you want to defeat him. Now, compare this fight with Agrabah's possessed head, and there's a few issues, with the biggest one being too much is happening. Sora, Donald, and Goofy are expected to fight the head, which is constantly moving, spitting out swarms of Heartless, and shoots tracking lasers. Donald and Goofy, no matter which tactics you select, die almost immediately. Since they don't have dodge rolls granting them with invincibility, they're forced to take everything head on, which is a death sentence. Next, if you defeat the Heartless the head summons, there's a very narrow window where you can actually attack without being third-partied. Agrabah's Heartless are also hyper-aggressive and will lunge at you from a mile away. After realizing it's borderline useless to kill them, you focus on the head who's probably shooting lasers at you. Even with Arrow, a spell reducing damage, cast on you, lasers still do a ton of damage, and when all these things are happening at once, it's just agony. And if you thought this boss is what I meant by frustrating, this is only the valley. Earlier when I said a splash of frustration, I'm primarily talking about Square's wasted potential. Every final mixed or enhanced re-release of Kingdom Hearts features boss battles that rival or sometimes even surpass FromSoft's Soulsborne and Capcom's Devil May Cry boss design. I plan on covering Souls and character action games one day, so be sure to subscribe if you're interested. Crafting well-designed bosses are genuinely difficult, so when Square Enix demonstrates the propensity to do so, it's bittersweet. Like, can you imagine a Kingdom Hearts game with Riku, Sephiroth, and the Hooded Figure's design philosophy at the core of every boss? And just so we're clear, I'm not saying to make all of them this difficult, but going from these this is a crime. I also understand that Kingdom Hearts is a family first game, so this will probably never happen. I'm sure longtime fans probably feel the same way, but I'd love to hear everyone's thoughts in the comments below. The last area of gameplay I'd like to discuss is the general rhythm or feel of the game. While the platforming is kind of janky, the camera is rough at times, summons and magic are blatantly overpowered, and the combat system was in its infancy compared to future entries, what's here, especially for 2002, was an incredibly solid foundation. It's really hard to describe, but none of the other games in the series really feel like the original. It could be the physics engine, the boss design, the lack of cinematics, the bad camera, the early decisions, or maybe a little bit of everything. But Kingdom Hearts 1 feels like a classic JRPG with a ton of replay value. I really can't describe why I find myself gravitating towards this game as time passes, but who knows, maybe I'm a simpleton who just enjoys rolling and hitting things. It's either that or the simple and charming story, which is an adjective I can't use to describe the rest of the series. Kingdom Hearts is a pretty standard coming-of-age story tackling themes you'd expect. The power of friendship, growing up, and being selfless are all center stage. Leveraging Disney's worlds and stories not only echoes the overarching themes, but also fleshes out the world of Kingdom Hearts. A common complaint you'll hear from longtime fans of the series is, and I quote, "The Disney worlds are filler," or they don't provide anything to the story. And while I certainly empathize with them later on in the series, they're actually pretty relevant in Kingdom Hearts 1. In parallel with Sora looking for his friends and stealing keyholes, he notices that the Princes of Hearts are being kidnapped. Not only are these worlds relevant in the grand scheme of things, but Sora, who's already a selfless character all about his friends, is constantly learning the importance of hearts, relationships, his friends, and doing what's right. Combining these themes with the overarching narrative makes these worlds an integral piece of Kingdom Hearts' world. These worlds are also magical since if you grew up watching these movies, you probably already have a relationship with these characters, and if you haven't seen the movies, consider this your homework. Although these worlds are important from a narrative perspective, they do, unfortunately, have some functional problems. Everyone already knows where I'm going with this, so let's talk about Destiny Islands and Deep Jungle. Destiny Island seems like a universally hated area. As a matter of fact, I don't think I've spoken with a single person who actually likes this place. Long story short, opening hours and hooks are very important to grab people, and in all fairness, the opening is actually pretty good. After watching the intro, you dive into your heart, pick your weapon of choice, fight some Heartless, and wake up on the beach with Kairi. Mystery and questions are introduced to players, which should drive us forward, but we're guided towards a brick wall instead. After this conversation with Kairi, the opening hours are spent hanging out with your friends, doing mini games, and collecting things for your raft. The best defense I have for this area is Square wanted to introduce Kairi and Riku and wanted to inform players that they should be exploring their surroundings. And while that's good and well, I'm sure tons of people were lost or frustrated on their first playthrough. Imagine asking for or buying a game you thought was an action RPG only to be collecting fish, coconuts, water, and other stuff. Destiny Islands is bad because it's an awful introduction for the rest of the game. No other worlds in the game finds you necessarily searching for things to progress forward. Puzzles, yes. Searching things, not so much. Nevertheless, you will escape, and when you do, the game takes you on another roller coaster. After arriving in Traverse Town, you fight some Heartless, the Final Fantasy characters do some world building, you fight guard armor with Donald and Goofy, and then you're off to Deep Jungle. My biggest issue with Deep Jungle are the lack of map and directions. Most games from the 90s or early to mid 2000s don't have quest logs or objective indicators. If you don't pay attention to the story, you can easily get lost. For those of you who weren't there, this resulted in constantly talking to NPCs for directions. If the NPCs don't help, I hope you have friends or a strategy guide on hand. Deep Jungle, conversely, is the worst of both worlds. In addition to the vines opening a myriad of paths, this world has numerous cutscenes that don't tell you where to go. Let's use this scene as an example. Sora tells Jane and Clayton he's looking for his friends. Clayton says they may be with the gorillas since they haven't seen anyone, and Tarzan reluctantly agrees to take you to them. As a friendly reminder, there's no map, vine swinging takes you all over the place, and it can be difficult to discern what you can and can't climb. When you blend these issues together, you get one of the most divisive worlds in the series. Sure, this world isn't a problem now, but I wouldn't be surprised if people got lost here on their first playthrough. Nevertheless, these issues are minor nitpicks in the grand scheme of things. As you play the game, it's genuinely fun watching events play out as Sora searches for his friends. Sora is a textbook JRPG protagonist. He's the chosen one, selfless, and willing to give up his life if it means helping his friends. Are all these tropes? Definitely, but it's also important to remember that his friends literally strengthen his heart, which is one of the most important things in the Kingdom Hearts world. I wish Sora wasn't so one-dimensional, but he's a likable character nonetheless. Now Riku, by comparison, is an incredibly well-written character. After Destiny Islands was taken by darkness, he forms a bond with Maleficent, who immediately starts manipulating him. She tells him that she can Be sure to catch me live on Twitch too if you want to catch the show, well, live, right? Like that's where I captured all the footage for Kingdom Hearts 1, Channel Memories in case we end up talking about that, and a huge shout out to the Domain Dwellers for supporting my creative endeavors. I really appreciate anybody for contributing anything to what we do over here on this channel, so really appreciate it, really grateful, and thank you so much for all your support. And if you'd like to join this list of people, consider becoming a channel member or subscribe on Twitch, where you'll receive early video access, special Discord roles, access to my scripts outlines, emotes, and more. A few questions before we get out of here. So how did you guys get into Kingdom Hearts? Was the original your first game? Do you appreciate the original more as time passes? Which Kingdom Hearts is your favorite? And is Kairi your favorite character? I'd love to keep the conversation going in the comments, but I'm going to get out of here. Video's long enough. Thanks again for watching. Feel free to join the Discord if you want to talk, and be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and I will catch you guys in the next one, whatever that may be.